Hi there, this is Josh, and today I'm here with my October-November wrap-up and December TBR. Uh, for the months of October and November, I read in and out 6 books, which one of which is a mammoth of a book, and I will be getting to that in a little bit. But let's just dive right into things. For the month of October, I wanted to take on some horror-themed writing, since it's that time of year because of Halloween, and I felt that should reflect in my reading. And horror fiction is an area that I'm interested in, not just with reading, but also with writing. The last thing I read in September and carried on over was Wild Nights by Joyce Carol Oates, and I thought that as this collection of short stories went on, I felt that the stories got better. The later stories included Mark Twain and his club that he created with teenage girls that were right below adulthood, and there was this one particular girl that he formed a bond with, and they kept going back and forth, corresponding, and then eventually she becomes an adult. There was Henry James and his volunteer work at the hospital right at the breakout of World War I, and then there was also Ernest Hemingway and his suicide attempts, which it's a fascinating area to explore because Hemingway is such a remarkable author who decided to take his own life, which these are some interesting reads, some interesting dark reads about noteworthy writers. I gave this 7 out of 10 because I felt that it was pretty good. I would say that much. I don't know if I'm going to get back to it anytime soon, but I think that it was a pretty clever idea on Oates' behalf. Next thing I read is from an author that I really wanted to get back to, and that is John Saul's Suffer the Children. I read When the Wind Blows 4 years ago, and this is his very first novel about horrific events on Port Arbella, and how the Conger family holds this family curse, and there are children that are disappearing one by one, and they are thinking that the youngest daughter, who is traumatized and will not speak, is the one behind everything. And Jack and Rose are the parents. Jack has his own issues. Rose is the housewife that's holding things together, and the quote-unquote angelic daughter in Elizabeth, who is able to keep Sarah under control. But all I'm going to say is you are going to get a taste of something that the people in the story do not know, and is mind-boggling to the chief of police, Ray Norton. And I think that it is something that is so horrific, and it would be a thrill ride for someone who enjoys it. Maybe not for the faint at heart, but I enjoyed it as the horror fiction enthusiast that I am, or as John Saul would rather be deemed, an enthusiast for writing thrillers. I gave this 8 out of 10, and I definitely want to read more John Saul. Next thing I read was from an author friend of mine, Carlotta Holton. I met her at a book fest, and we have kept in touch through the years. I was with the Literature Club. I had her as a guest, and I also convinced the Garden State Speculative Fiction writers to invite her, and they did. And this is her follow-up to Touching the Dead, which has to do with stories from the background of superstition, which is an area that she's really interested in. She writes about superstitions from across the globe. And Grave Matters, it touches up on that, and some of the stories are just quite remarkable. She writes about the All Souls Day in Scorpio Sting. November 2nd is allegedly a day, if you're born on that day, you are cursed. I'm not going to say what this story is about, because that's something that you should really explore. And that would be, it's just quite something. A Grave Matters is, the title story is about Giles Corey having risen. Giles Corey has risen, which touches up on the Salem witch trials and how he was stoned to death, but he cursed the town for several years afterward. And it's quite creepy that things went down that way. Rags Bones, which has to do with a man who hands out rags and bones for people. It's part of a business, but yet children are going missing, and one girl feels suspicious about the situation, and when she learns the truth. Ooh. And Saving Face, which is the opening story, has to do with cursed masks at a masquerade party. This is quite a collection. I think that anybody that's looking for some creepy reads that have actual connections, they're definitely going to get something out of this. And you should definitely check out more from Carlotta Holton, especially Touching the Dead, which has more superstitious stories in it. And I gave this an 8 out of 10. Next thing I read was for an upcoming episode of Literary Gladiators, Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. Brandon from Books and Beer, I'll leave his link down below. He's a James Baldwin enthusiast, and he highly suggested that we go over something from Baldwin's bibliography, and I think that Giovanni's Room is a good place to start. And it touches up on homosexuality in 1956. I think the best way to describe this is that James Baldwin is a remarkable writer who is really good with telling a story. He's excellent with setting, and he has that way with words that makes the experience worth following. The downside to this is that I did not like a single character in here, because I thought that they were so self-centered, self-pitying, and they just made very selfish decisions in here. A lot of selfies. Don't get, but I felt that Giovanni's probably the one that you would have the most sympathy for, but he just is. He bears the self-pity, and David is just looking out for himself, is what it seems, which maybe that's what had to be done in order for this to come to the people's attention and to introduce this way of life. But I still felt that I wish I could have liked the characters a bit more. But that's not going to stop me from reading more James Baldwin, because he's a remarkable writer that deserves attention. I gave this book a 7 out of 10. Next thing I read was The Things We Keep by Sally Hepworth, which will not be out until January 2016, but I got this early from St. Martin's Press in exchange for an honest review. I commented on a Goodreads friend of mine, her name is In. She's a remarkable blogger. She blogs about books, and she has a separate blog about positive thinking. I'll leave links to both of them down below. Whimsicality is just, it puts a smile on your face, and it's definitely going to do that. But The Things We Keep is about a woman named Anna Forster, who is 38 years old and has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. She voluntarily goes into the assisted living facility, and she meets a man 2 years older, and he's dealing with dementia that has also left him with a speech impediment, a stutter. His name is Luke. And while these two are forming a bond with one another, Eve Bennett and her daughter Clementine are dealing with their own issues relating to Eve's husband and Clementine's father, Richard, who ended up, his Ponzi scheme became exposed, and he was on the edge of getting into trouble, and he decided to commit suicide, leaving them scrambling to make ends meet while being able to save their faces, because they're getting the blame for Richard's actions. And Eve decides to take up a job as a cook at the assisted living facility, and she becomes intertwined into Anna and Luke's relationship. What I liked about this book was the character development was just spectacular. I think that the message that they're trying to get at is, even if one forgets, that does not take away their ability to love. And it's this whole idea that love never forgets. An issue that I had with it was the fact that Eve's story was so big that it was a bit overwhelming to the main message regarding Anna and Luke's bonding with one another. But I think that the character development definitely made up for it. You get Anna, Eve, and you even get Clementine's side of the story. And I think that the way that Hepworth wrote Clementine is just, she did a great job capturing the age. And I also like the residents at the assisted living facility. Clara and Lori and their what seemed like an ideal 60-year marriage, but had much more to it. And then you had Bert, who is the grumpy old man who is still looking after a long-gone Myrna. I gave this 7 out of 10 because I really liked the development of the characters, and I cared for them, but I felt that what could have been a bit of what could have been a main story and a bit of a side story was, the side story really overwhelmed the key message. And currently I am reading this mammoth here, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. This is a French classic. I have been looking to get into this since I bought it on a trip to Washington, D.C. 4 years ago. I'm currently just about ready to begin Book 7 as I'm taping this video. And at the moment, I'm really hooked. I think that I'm really beginning to feel for Fantine. Don't even think about telling me what happened just yet. I'm definitely going to get back into this. The rest of for December, I'm probably going to be reading Les Mis, but I also have on here Keep the Aspidistra Flying by George Orwell. And I'm doing that as a buddy read with Rio from Rio Reads, and she's a really remarkable, intelligent, underrated booktuber who I definitely am thinking about promoting in my upcoming Pay It Forward on BookTube tag. I'm up to part 4 with that. Next time I do that, I'll definitely keep her in mind. But I read a summary to that particular novel, and quite interesting, about a nonconformist who dances to their own tune, and I like those kind of stories. I read Stoner earlier in the year, and he really amazed me. Alrighty, here we go. This is what has been on my agenda. Already, I hope everybody's having a good reading month. I hope you have a great reading month in December. Thank you for tuning in, and for now, keep reading.